In the barren deserts of a world that had once been full of life, the Apache people had found a way to survive. The earth had changed, many cities had crumbled, and advanced technology was now a mystery to most. The land was wild, untamed, and full of secrets. But amidst all of this, there was a girl who stood out. Her name was Sachin, and she was known throughout the Apache tribe not just for her beauty, but for the ancient prophecy that had followed her from birth. Sachin was different. Unlike the other girls in the village, she never smiled with the same ease. Her heart, though strong, was heavy with the weight of the prophecy that had been spoken at her birth. It was said that no man would ever want her as his partner, for the spirits had marked her with a curse that would bring doom to anyone who tried to share their life with her. The elders had warned her parents that she would never find love. The prophecy was clear, and no one dared go against it. Sachin, now in her late teens, had long accepted that she would live her life alone. The other women in the village had all found husbands, their homes filled with joy and laughter. But Sachin's heart was quiet, silent, as if it had never known warmth. Despite this, Sachin was a warrior at heart. She was skilled with a bow and arrow, a master of the hunting knives that hung by her side. She had learned the ways of her people, respecting the land and its creatures. Her connection to nature was deep, and it brought her peace in the midst of her loneliness. But as the days passed, a growing sadness filled her. She longed for companionship, someone to share her life with, someone who wouldn't see her as the curse the elders had spoken of. One hot afternoon, as the sun blazed in the sky, Sachin set out to find a rare flower that only bloomed once a year in a hidden valley deep within the desert. Her people believed it had healing powers, and it was said that those who found it would be blessed with wisdom. Sachin had heard of it in stories, and she hoped that if she could find this flower, it might bring her some answers about her future. As she walked alone through the desert, the silence around her was broken only by the soft wind and the crunch of sand beneath her feet. The heat was unbearable, but Sachin pressed on, determined to find the valley. She had always felt a connection to the land, and today it seemed to guide her as if it knew her heart's wish. By midday, as she was nearing the valley, Sachin heard the sound of something unusual, a low hum like the engine of a vehicle. Her sharp eyes scanned the horizon, and she saw a strange shape in the distance rising from the dunes. It was a large craft, sleek and metallic, with a gleaming surface that reflected the sun's harsh light. It was unlike anything Sachin had ever seen. She knew immediately that it wasn't from her world. Curiosity drew her closer, but as she approached, she saw that the craft had landed. From it, a man stepped out. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a weathered face, his clothes a mix of old-fashioned cowboy gear and high-tech armor. His boots left deep marks in the sand as he walked toward her, his eyes hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. Sachin stopped, instinctively reaching for her knife. She didn't know if this man was friend or foe, but she was ready to defend herself. The man noticed her immediately, his gaze sharp but not threatening. He raised a hand in greeting, and though he didn't speak at first, his presence was calm. "I don't mean you any harm," he said after a moment, his voice deep and steady. Sachin didn't lower her weapon. The man smiled faintly as if he understood her hesitation. "I'm Wyatt Mercer," he said, offering his hand. "I've been traveling through these parts for a while, looking for a rare artifact." Sachin didn't respond right away. She had heard of outsiders who came to the desert, often searching for things that didn't belong to them, but this man Wyatt seemed different. He wasn't like the others who had come to the land to plunder its secrets. There was something in his eyes, a quiet confidence but also respect for the land. "I am Sachin," she finally said, still wary, "and I do not trust outsiders." Wyatt nodded, his eyes not leaving hers. "I don't expect you to," he said simply, "but I mean no harm." For a long moment they stood there, the silence stretching between them. Sachin was uncertain of what to do. The prophecy that had been spoken at her birth told her to stay away from men. Yet here was one standing before her, not with fear or judgment, but with quiet understanding. Wyatt broke the silence. "I've heard of the Apache people," he said, his voice softening. "You've survived in this desert for generations. You know these lands better than anyone." Sachin was surprised. Few outsiders ever spoke of her people with respect. Most saw them as relics of a bygone time, but Wyatt seemed different. He didn't see her as a curse or a woman to be feared. He saw her as a person. This was a strange feeling for Sachin, one she had never known. She glanced down at the ground, unsure of what to say next. You've heard of the prophecy, she said softly. I am the one it speaks of. No man will ever want me. Wyatt tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. A prophecy, huh? I don't put much stock in those. Fate's not something you can predict. Sometimes you just have to make your own way. Sachin looked up at him, her heart beating a little faster. But the prophecy is real, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I have seen it in the eyes of every man I have met. They fear me because of it. Wyatt stepped closer, his eyes softening as he looked at her. I don't fear you, Sachin, he said. I don't even know what your prophecy is, but I don't believe that it defines who you are. It doesn't make you less than anyone else. For the first time in years, Sachin felt something stir within her, a flicker of hope. Could it be true? Could she live a life where the prophecy didn't control her every step? Could she find someone who wouldn't fear her? Before she could speak, the wind began to pick up and the sky darkened. A storm was brewing in the distance. Wyatt turned toward the horizon, then back at Sachin. We should find shelter, he said, his voice serious. A sandstorm's coming. You'll want to stay with me until it passes. Sachin hesitated. The desert was dangerous, and it wasn't wise to trust an outsider. But something about Wyatt's calm demeanor and his words had touched her heart. She nodded slowly, deciding to follow him. Perhaps for once it was worth stepping away from the path that had been set for her. As they walked together toward the shelter of his ship, Sachin couldn't help but feel that her life was about to change. Maybe, just maybe, this man was the one who would prove that prophecies didn't always have to come true, and maybe for the first time she would discover that she was not the curse they all believed her to be. The storm arrived quickly. Dark clouds rolled across the sky like a blanket of dust, and the wind howled through the desert, kicking up sand that stung like tiny needles. Wyatt Mercer, his face set with determination, led Sachin toward the shelter of his ship. The craft, sleek and sturdy, stood like a sentinel against the coming storm. Sachin followed him, her mind still spinning with the strange encounter. She had never met anyone like Wyatt. Most men she had known in the past saw her as a curse, as something to avoid, but not Wyatt. He had treated her with respect, not fear. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one that made her heart beat a little faster. When they reached the ship, Wyatt opened the hatch and they both stepped inside. The interior was simple, with polished metal walls and dim, soft lighting. It smelled faintly of oil and metal, and the hum of the engines was a steady background noise. Wyatt led her to a small room at the back of the ship, where a table and 2 chairs stood. This will be a good place to wait out the storm, Wyatt said, his voice calm. We should be safe here until it passes. Sachin nodded, though she felt a little out of place. She was used to the open desert, not the inside of a metal ship. But something about being in this small, quiet space made her feel oddly comforted. Perhaps it was the way Wyatt had treated her, like she was more than just a girl with a curse. They sat in silence for a while, the storm howling outside. Sachin stared out the window at the swirling dust, watching the chaos of the desert as the wind pushed everything around. Inside the ship, however, there was peace. She could hear Wyatt moving around, adjusting things and making sure everything was secure. He didn't seem bothered by the storm at all. After a while, he returned to the table and sat across from her. He studied her for a moment, his eyes soft. You know, he said, you don't have to live by that prophecy. You don't have to believe that you're cursed. Sachin looked at him, unsure of what to say. For as long as she could remember, the prophecy had been a part of her life. It had shaped her every decision, her every action. But Wyatt's words felt like a breath of fresh air, something new, something that might change everything. I've always believed it, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The elders spoke of it when I was born. They said no man would ever want me, that I was doomed to live alone. Wyatt shook his head slowly. I don't believe in fate like that. I've seen people who were told they'd never succeed, and then they did. I've seen people overcome things that seemed impossible, and I believe you can overcome this prophecy too. Sachin felt a spark of hope flicker in her chest, but it was quickly replaced by doubt. But the men of my village, they all stay away from me because of it. They see me as a curse. They think that anyone who is with me will bring bad luck. Wyatt leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I don't know what those men think, but I do know that I've never met anyone like you, Sachin. You're strong, smart, and brave. You can make your own path in life, and you don't have to let anyone else decide your future. The words were simple, but they felt like a wave crashing over her, washing away years of doubt. For the first time in her life, Sachin wondered if Wyatt was right. Could it really be true? Could she live her life the way she wanted, free from the curse that had bound her for so long? The storm outside began to quiet down, and the ship seemed to settle as if the world outside was coming back to life. Wyatt stood up and walked over to the small window, peering out at the now calm desert. "The storm's almost over," he said, his voice steady. "We'll head out soon, but I want you to know something, Sachin." Sachin looked up at him, waiting for him to continue. "You're not alone," Wyatt said, his tone soft but firm. "You don't have to face everything by yourself. I'll help you if you want. We can find a way to break this curse together." Sachin's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever said something like that to her before. It was hard to believe. Hard to imagine that someone could offer to stand by her side, to fight against the prophecy that had controlled her life. She looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of her emotions. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "You don't know me. You don't know what it's like to live with this curse." Wyatt's expression softened, and he crouched down in front of her. "Maybe I don't know exactly what it's like to live with a curse, but I do know what it's like to carry a heavy burden. We all have something that weighs us down, but we don't have to carry it alone. Sometimes we need someone to help lighten the load." Sachin swallowed hard, the words hitting her deeper than she expected. She had spent so many years believing she was alone, that no one could understand her struggles. But here was Wyatt offering to help her, to stand by her side. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Wyatt replied. "You just have to know that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." Sachin's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly wiped them away. She had never allowed herself to cry, never allowed herself to hope for something more. But now, with Wyatt's promise, something inside her shifted. Perhaps it was possible to break free from the prophecy. Perhaps it was possible to find a life where she wasn't defined by the past. As the last of the storm passed, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the desert. The world outside was calm again, and the silence inside the ship felt comfortable, peaceful. Wyatt stood up, offering his hand to Sachin. "Let's get moving," he said with a smile. "We've got a long road ahead of us." Sachin hesitated for just a moment, then took his hand. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a curse. She felt like someone who could change her own fate. With Wyatt by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would find a way to break the prophecy. Together, they would make their own future. And as they stepped out of the ship into the vast desert, Sachin realized that the path ahead of her was no longer determined by fate. It was hers to choose.